Hi everyone, this is Rumor, and I thought I'd get us started off with Malcolm's fantastic idea called Shelf Awareness, a series of audio recordings of threads on standing trials. And I'm really excited to get us started with Niv and Faith's thread called The Festival. It's in EMEA, or EMEA, sorry, anomaly, and apologies in advance for my terrible mispronunciation of all words standing trials. Otherwise, please bear with me and settle back, grab a cup of coffee, enjoy. The Festival. 37th of Zeta, Arc 716. A barrage of cheerful music filled the air as the festival everyone had been waiting for finally arrived. Niv was in the thick of it, dancing about in a long dress made from an eclectic assortment of brightly colored leaves. The beaded necklaces she wore jingled about, as Niv felt the beat from the nearby drums in her shoulders. Her hips shook and she twirled about, all while donning a bright smile. Like all the dancers at the festival, Niv was paired with another. Her partner was a tall Tanoa male who wore a carved and painted lion mask with feathered plumage from his mane. For his mane. His oversized shirt, covered in seashell shards, clattered about as he tried his best to keep up with Niv's lively dance moves. The location and the dancers were all a mix of Tanoa and human. It was a marketplace arranged in a fashion one might find in Rinmir, with stalls carrying all manner of products, with eager shopkeepers competing for attention. Where it differed was in the colorful fungi and twisting vines that had a contrasting scale only a Tanoa would find normal. The wildlife shared this disproportion. A stray dog that weaved through the dancing crowds could easily be scooped up, and carried off by the tropical budgie perched atop the stall that sold fragrant bars of soap. "Change partners! Squawk!" the budgie announced loudly as it waved its wings about to get everyone's attention. Niv's partner spun to the left and she spun to the right. Niv's glassy eyes grew wide in shock when she recognized the face of her new partner. Her face quickly went back to a smile once the initial shock subsided. "It's been a long time, Faith." Faith had never seen anything like this before. It was amazing to her. People were dancing, and she really didn't know how to do that. She'd only ever danced once before, and that was in a very formal ball with Tristan Venora. This was completely different, and the sounds and sights were astonishing to the young woman. She was standing, her hair loose and with flowers entwined within it, and wearing a pretty white dress, embellished with tiny flowers and accents of lace. The dress was sleeveless and tight-fitting in the bodice, which showed two things. First, Faith had no brands in this dream. Her skin was pale and smooth, as though she had never been branded at all. Second, her figure was more proportionate. She had graduated from scrawny to slender, somewhere along the line. She was doing her best to keep up with the dancing, but then the parrot had told her that there was going to be a cake later, and had she made it? No, she said. She hadn't, and the parrot made a screech of displeasure and flew off. How very strange, she thought. But she was too busy trying to dance. She was dancing with a man, but she didn't know who he was. He wore a strange mask which, every time she asked him to take it off, he removed to reveal another. It was, frankly, odd. He was friendly enough, and he told her that it wasn't his fault. It was the way that he was made. She didn't quite believe him until he removed his hand and gave it to her to show her that it was, in fact, how he was made. "I have a friend who could use this. Can I keep it?" she wondered. He shook his head, removed his mask, and handed it to her. "No, but he can borrow that. He's probably got 100. Why aren't you dancing with your boyfriend?" he wondered. Faith looked around and sighed. "He isn't here. I think he's building a mouse. He sees ghosts, you know." The masked man nodded and spun away from her. There, though in his place, was a familiar face. How was it that they were the same size, Faith wondered? Was she small or Niv big? How strange. "Niv, how are you? It has been a long time. Is this your dance?" "I don't know how to do the steps. I'd never learned to dance, and everyone knows how to do it. Even the frogs, and they should be frozen." She gestured to two frogs in top hats, dancing together. They were completely out of time with everyone else and totally doing their own thing, but that was fine because at the end of the trial, they were having fun. I'm about as happy as a bird who just caught a big juicy worm, Niv proclaimed joyfully with an exuberant stretch of her arms. I hope you can say the same, friend. The memories of their last encounter were hazy at best, which was expected considering it was a dream. Niv remembered there was something unpleasant going on in Faith's life, but until the memories were made fresh, that's all Niv would know. Faith could have just as easily revealed that she was secretly an ostrich as far as Niv was concerned. Oh, this isn't my dance. It's the dance of the festival, Niv proclaimed as she performed a nimble twirl. You just need to let the music do the dancing for you. Niv demonstrated by first stepping side to side with her feet in time with drum's steady beat. Then her hips began swiveling along with the same beat, but in a different way. That's the drum's doing. Niv began rocking her shoulders back and forth along with the flute of the snake charmer. Her arms suddenly got a life of their own and moved about in strange and seemingly chaotic ways. Though after a few moves, it would become clearer that Niv was telling the music's story using the language of hand gestures. That is the flute. Niv began running on the spot as she slowly rotated, with her whole upper body moving about with vigor, then seamlessly transitioned to jumping, twirling, and even dropping into the splits with ease. The Tanawa did so to the tune of a foreign instrument Faith was unlikely to see. An elderly Severin was playing it as he sung an upbeat tune in Xanthian. The instrument looked like someone was trying to make a guitar by shoving a massive slab of wood into a drum. It made a strange but pleasant sound that added to the festival's exotic flair. And that's the Ibudu Itaja. Make sense? Now just keep your body loose and move with the music. Niv motioned her hands for Faith to follow suit as she started to dance around the former slave. Faith looked at Niv and the movements she was making, and the former slave shook her head. No, I can't do that. It is beautiful music, though. I'm afraid that my body doesn't move in that kind of way. Maybe it was a small person thing, Faith thought, but then she realized that she and Niv were the same height. How odd. She wasn't smaller, because everything else was the right height, too. Yet, maybe that was... No, she couldn't work it out. But then a smile lit her features. I had a dream about you. Didn't you know in that dream you were ever so small? How silly. Watching Niv dance, Faith stood and repeated the headshake. I'm just not capable of that, I'm afraid. Not at all. You're moving in ways that... Oh, did that hurt? Concern creased her brow as she asked that question. It certainly looked like it should have hurt, she thought. There was no doubting it. Niv was very bendy. I think I'll just... Look, there's my stall. Faith started to move towards the cookery stall, which she was suddenly standing behind, having somehow donned an apron and a very, very, very tall chef's hat. She brandished the spatula after she had put the small pastry down on the serviette and handed it to Niv. Eat it while it's warm or it melts. This might seem like a ridiculous thing to say, but the pastry was ice cream encased in a hot meringue, and it was, in fact, delicious. Faith smiled and called out, Eggs, bread, and an apple! Come get them! She smiled a beautiful smile to Niv, her face showing genuine delight. It's his favorite breakfast, I think. Would you like some? She'd have to get in the queue quickly, because Faith saw that there were maybe 7 or even 800 people lined up in a very orderly fashion. Oh dear, Niv, where did they all come from? Faith looked a little concerned at the one basket of eggs. Oh well, she decided, and got started. It can move any way you wish it to, but if you don't feel comfortable... Niv trailed off a bit and tried to hide her disappointment that her friend didn't wish to dance. The Tanawa assumed Faith was just shy, and there was no room in dance for shyness. Niv wouldn't push the subject any further, since she knew a person had to overcome these things on their own. Now that I think about it... Niv's eyes narrowed and her brows became strained as she struggled to recall a foggy memory. I think I dreamed that everyone was bigger than me, including you. She scratched her chin and smiled in contemplation. Dreams really are strange. One of the curly green vines that grew from Niv's head sprang to life, in the form of a snake. It looked at Faith with bright yellow eyes and whipped its tongue out to taste the air. A slight breeze brushed by, and the snake hitched a ride, letting the current take it out into the festival. What's this? Niv dropped down into another split. Oh, I barely feel it. She stopped to look down at the position of her legs. looking up at the one leg stretched perfectly in front of her, and then looked back to see the same image. Yeah, this should probably hurt, but it feels natural right now. Niv shrugged her shoulders. Must be the festival's doing. Niv danced quite a bit, but still wasn't that flexible in real life. Whenever she got close to completing a true split, the bark in her inner thighs would start to scream at her. It was something she was working on. Your stall? Niv tilted her head and raised an eyebrow in confusion as she followed Faith to the flagrant-smelling shack. Faith was suddenly wearing a large poofy hat and handing out odd-looking food. One of the women's creations was given to Niv, who looked at the foreign object with curiosity. Niv carefully looked at it from every angle and hesitantly smelled the confectionery. The aroma entered Niv's nostrils and filled them with a warm and comforting, but also completely alien scent. She quickly threw it in her mouth and sunk her teeth into it. To Niv, it felt like she had just tasted the sweetest and juiciest grub, and it nearly brought tears of sap running down her eyes. What is it? Niv whispered with the type of awe a child has when they encounter something wonderful but foreign. Why is it warm, but also cold? Is it magic? Oh dear, you have quite a lot of people waiting for your food. Niv looked back as the line seemed to almost double in a matter of moments. Can I help you in any way? Even in her dreams, Niv didn't know the first thing about cooking, since her diet consisted of bugs and poisonous mushrooms. Though Niv was still certain she could figure it out if she had to. Well, that isn't true, you know. You can't lick your own elbow no matter how hard you try. Faith was quite clear on that. Also, you can't waggle your own ear. When I was a slave, sometimes my owners would instruct me to stand on the toes of one foot for breaks at a time. I never could. So there are lots of things that my body can't do, no matter how much I tell it to. Faith was quite sure this was the case, and the flexible little Tanawa was wrong about what her body could do. I went to a ball once. Everyone was dancing, but my feet hurt. I'd like to be able to be as bendy as you, but I don't think that's in my nature, though. I wasn't raised that way. I imagine it's all about how you're raised, really. Bendy parents and all that. Niv liked the pastry that she'd put in her hands, and Faith shook her head. It's not magic, no. It's what I do. I make food. I'm a chef. It's called a baked viden. Frozen cream dessert wrapped in a meringue and then cooked really quickly. It's good, isn't it? She looked rather nervously at the people, but Niv was there to help, and Faith nodded her head. Every person that comes, give them an apple, a hammer, and a piece of wood. Tell them to go over there and make a coffin. Faith was starting to get confused, in her dream and sleeping state. But cook the eggs for me, Niv. Put them in the boiling water. Where's the boiling water? Looking at the line, she turned back to Niv and realized that the small Tanawa had turned into an egg, but still had Niv's face. As the spatula flew up and hit her in the face in the dream, Faith sat up in bed and looked around blearily, before laying back down and curling up to go back to sleep. The end. So huge thank you to Niv and Faith for letting me read this story out loud. I hope you enjoyed it, despite my terrible pronunciation of Tanawa or however I was pronouncing it. Thank you, Malcolm, for this fantastic idea. It was so much fun to read aloud, and I hope you guys had as much fun listening to it as I did. So in my post, I will link to the thread, and I'll also link to the music that Niv included in the thread itself, so that you can maybe listen as you read. I'm going to try and do something fancy in the podcast and see if I can get it in here, but it's outlook unlikely. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you around the site. This is Rumor signing off.